China just handed America one of the most direct challenges to its global economic power in decades. Not secretly, not through back channels, publicly. On official government letterhead from the Ministry of Commerce, Beijing told its oil companies to ignore U.S. sanctions and keep doing business with Iran like nothing happened. That's not a leak, that's not a rumor. That's a government document that basically says American sanctions don't apply here anymore. And to understand why that's such a massive deal, you need to understand how American sanctions actually work, because this isn't just about oil. This is about the entire system the U.S. has used to police global trade for the last 30 years. The U.S. dollar is still the world's reserve currency. That means the majority of global trade, oil, commodities, billion-dollar contracts, gets priced and settled in dollars. And those dollar transactions, at some point, flow through American banks or U.S.-linked financial institutions. That gives Washington a chokehold on the global financial system. OFAC, the Office of Foreign Assets Control, which operates under the Treasury Department, is how they pull that lever. When they sanction a company, they're not just cutting off trade with the U.S., they're threatening any company anywhere in the world that does business with that entity. The message is simple: deal with them and you lose access to the U.S. financial system. For most banks and exporters in Europe, Asia, Latin America, that threat alone is enough. Losing dollar clearing access is catastrophic. That's why sanctions work. That's why countries comply even when they privately disagree. Now let's see what exactly happened here. The U.S. sanctioned a group of Chinese oil refineries known in the industry as teapot refineries, independent, privately owned facilities concentrated in China's eastern coastal provinces, particularly Shandong. These refineries have been quietly purchasing discounted Iranian crude for years, processing it and selling the refined products. OFAC sanctioned them in late April 2026, citing their role in bankrolling Iran's sanctioned oil trade. Standard procedure, the U.S. has done this to Indian companies, Turkish companies, and dozens of others over the years. Usually what happens next is the targeted companies quietly wind down those operations, maybe pay a fine, and comply. That's how it's always gone. China did the opposite. Beijing's Ministry of Commerce issued a directive telling those exact same refineries to continue operating normally and ignore the U.S. designations. And then, this is the part that makes this historic, the government said it would provide a legal shield to cover any financial losses those companies suffered because of the sanctions. So if a European buyer cancels a contract because they're scared of American secondary sanctions, the Chinese government steps in and covers the loss. They're not just defying the sanctions, they're financially neutralizing them. Compare that to how India has handled the same situation. India has consistently said it doesn't support unilateral sanctions. That's been New Delhi's official position for years. But India has never told Indian companies to openly ignore them. When Indian firms got sanctioned by OFAC in 2025 for Iranian oil deals, they backed down. They stopped the transactions. They sought exemptions. China just drew a completely different line. Now, and this is important, some of the commentary around this story is being overstated, so let's see what the facts actually say. It is absolutely accurate that China's Ministry of Commerce issued this directive, but facts also say that teapot refineries have been processing Iranian crude at significant scale. Some estimates put their combined capacity at over 3 million barrels per day. Now let's see the legal angle here. China has long argued U.S. unilateral sanctions violate international law, and while that's not a universally accepted legal conclusion, the facts say the United Nations never authorized the current Iran sanctions regime. The U.S. imposed those unilaterally. China's legal argument has at least a partial foundation in international norms, even if most Western legal systems don't recognize it. What's being overstated is the claim that this signals the end of American sanctions power altogether. That's too strong. Sanctions still work devastatingly well on smaller economies. Iran, Venezuela, North Korea, they're all severely constrained. But facts say the limits of sanction power are specific to major economies that have enough financial mass to absorb or route around the consequences. China is one of maybe 2 or 3 countries on Earth in that position, so this isn't a universal crack in the system, it's a stress test at the highest level. The timing of this move is not an accident either, and this is where geopolitics gets really interesting. China has been closely watching the U.S.-Iran military situation play out. As of early 2026, the U.S. conducted significant strikes against Iranian nuclear and missile infrastructure, but Iran has not collapsed. There's no regime change, no full capitulation, no clear American victory to point to. The conflict has strained U.S.-European relations. Multiple EU leaders have publicly criticized the escalation. American attention and resources are stretched. Beijing is reading this as a window. Washington is overextended, its traditional alliances are showing cracks, and its appetite for opening a second major confrontation with China over oil refineries is probably low. This sanctions defiance is a calculated bet made at a moment of American distraction. Now, let's see the bigger ripple effect this creates. There's a signal being sent to every mid-sized country that's been quietly grumbling about American sanctions for years. If China can do this openly and face no serious blowback, others will start doing their own math. That's the real long-term risk here. Not that China alone defies sanctions, but that China's defiance becomes a template. But facts say the dollar's share of global central bank reserves has already declined from around 71% in 2000 to roughly 58% in recent years. That's a slow erosion, not a collapse, but the foundation that makes sanctions powerful is quietly shrinking, and moves like this accelerate that trend. So where does this leave the US right now? The Trump administration has a planned visit to Beijing on the books. Canceling it looks reactive and confirms the sanctions didn't matter. Showing up as planned looks like you're ignoring a direct challenge to your authority. Neither is a clean option. More broadly, the post-World War II arrangement where America essentially set the rules of global commerce, enforced through dollar dominance and financial system access, is under more genuine pressure than it's been in 80 years. Not because America is suddenly weak, but because other power centers have grown strong enough to push back. This isn't a crisis, but it is a signal, and the entire world, especially every country that's ever been threatened with secondary sanctions, is watching very closely to see what happens next, because if there are no real consequences for China here, that silence will be louder than anything Washington could say.